All right, so the last 10 MCQs. So a central bank pursues a policy of quantitative easing, which is basically increasing money supply to, in a way, increase aggregate demand. That's normally the idea behind quantitative easing, to stimulate the economy by purchasing government securities. What is likely to happen to interest rates and aggregate expenditure? So what you should know, as money supply increases, interest rates follow an inverse relationship, so they decrease. You can also look at this through the liquidity preference curve. If this is your demand for money, so interest rates, quantity of money. If your money supply increases to the right, you can clearly see how interest rates are falling. And a decrease in money supply should increase investments, should increase consumption, should be expansionary, and hence your aggregate demand or your aggregate expenditure should rise, giving you answer B. 22, according to monetarist theory, if there is an unanticipated increase in the money supply, what will be the short run effect on money, wages, real wages, and level of employment? So while the monetarists do believe in the long run that your long run aggregate supply is fixed, so in the long run, increases in aggregate demand won't have any effect if you look at your long run aggregate supply. But even for them, in the short run, their aggregate supply is still curved upwards. So if increase in money supply brings about an increase in aggregate demand, if aggregate demands goes like something like this, your actual point should still improve, uh, which means your employment should increase. That is one thing we can say for sure. So we can cross out B and D. Now the question here remains, well, we can leave these. So, and in fact, now that you cross out B and D, you can tell that real wages will decrease, and that also makes sense because if you look at this diagram, um, in a way, if you think about it, inflation has come about because, well, demand pull inflation would happen. So your real wages would decrease. Now, would your money wages decrease or would your money wages increase? What do you guys think?
Wages increase.
They increase?
They increase in the short run, and because that is why you move towards वो जो augmented Phillips curve था वो shift होता है इससे तो because your wages increase ना short run.
Okay, okay. So yeah, and it generally makes more sense if you're stimulating the economy more. Your money wages should increase. Or your real wages might not follow the same pattern because demand pull inflation, but as you're stimulating the economy more, you're growing your actual with regards to actual growth, at least that's happening. So your wages should increase. Anyhow, in a closed economy with no government, C is this, I is 60, where C is consumption, Y is income, and I is investment. What is the equilibrium level of income? So if you look at a closed economy with no government, so here, if you want to figure out the equilibrium level of income, that would be aggregate expenditure. Here would just be C plus I, because it can't be G because it's no government. It can't be X minus M because it's closed. And what you should know, at equilibrium, aggregate expenditure is also equals to your national income. So which means Y is equals to C plus I. And now you can substitute it. So C was 40 plus 0.8 Y, and I is 60, which gives this, if my mental math is not that good, 100. I believe this is 500. I hope. I think whatever. Yeah, I think that's 500. So 24. A developing economy experiences a rapid growth in labor productivity. What is most likely to result from this? An increase in the country's balance of trade deficit? Not likely. Most probably your exports will increase now because they're more competitive because costs have fallen since labor productivity has increased. So the deficit wouldn't increase, that's for sure. An increase in the country's relative labor costs. So labor costs probably relative to output, and that is not likely to happen. In fact, relative to your output, your labor costs are likely to go down because your productivity, so the same labor is producing more output. A depreciation of the country's currency. I don't see the link for to currency to labor productivity here. If anything, if that increases exports, that would just appreciate the currency, not depreciate it. So we can cross that out. But what the most appropriate, what the most likely thing to happen is an increase in the real income per head, because well, your populace is more. Well, you don't know anything about the populace here, but the idea is increase in labor productivity would definitely increase GDP. So it is very, very likely that if labor productivity increases, your aggregate supply increases, stuff of that sort. So without a subsequent increase in inflationary pressures, you increase your GDP. And obviously per head, the population hasn't, there's no given us no information to suggest that the population has changed. Anyhow, which change would cause an increase in a country's HDI value? So if you remember, your HDI is going to be looking at three major things. Your HDI looks at GNP per head, I believe, real GNP per head, something of that sort. So it looks at economic growth. It looks at your average years of schooling, plus the literacy rate. Uh, it also looks at life expectancy. That's pretty much it. I believe these days it also looks at expected years of schooling, but like, yeah, that doesn't really make that much of a difference. So gender inequality doesn't look at it. Income inequality doesn't look at it. Increase in mean years of schooling, which is mean is obviously average. So yeah, that's fine. That would increase your HDI value. It doesn't look at retirement age. So you have to be very clear what it looks at. Real output in an economy grows by 2.5%, but at the same time, the level of unemployment decreases. What can be deduced from this information? So if you think about this, if you look at your PPC, this was your actual point and your real output has grown. So you're now here. Instead of point A, you're here in point B. Uh, wait, just a sec. But it said the level of employment decreases. So if you just look at this particular PPC here, it shows employment has increased. So the level of unemployment decreases means unemployment has to increase. So your PPC has to shift outwards. So before you had this much, let's say, unemployment. Now you had growth, you did have an increase in output. However, you have this much unemployment, which clearly means you have more unemployment or less employment. It's more unemployment obviously means less employment. So that works. So in this particular case, you have to look at something that increases your PPC. It can't be, I don't believe it is A, because if actual has grown more quickly than potential, then the level of employment would have increased, not decreased. If labor productivity has increased, well, that could be possible because that might shift your PPC. So your actual point increases, but your PPC shifts as well. The population of working age has fallen. If the working age population falls, then that should have an inward shift from your PPC, not an outward shift. Increase in the rate of inflation, I don't see how that would shift your PPC, so you can cross that out. Do you guys agree with this explanation? So Bilal is silent, but we got a go ahead from Shayyar, so that's good enough. Um, a government decides to produce a more reflationary fiscal policy, so like basically an inflationary fiscal policy that wants to increase aggregate demand, and a more deflationary monetary policy which wants to reduce aggregate demand. Which combination of changes in policy instruments is consistent with this? So you want to increase government expenditure, you want to and okay, so let's look at the fiscal elements first. So government expenditure and taxation, and you want to increase aggregate demand, so you want expansionary. So for that, government expenditure has to increase and taxation has to decrease, giving you C. And obviously for deflationary monetary policy, interest rates, if they increase, if they're high, that is contractionary or deflationary. So that also confirms that your answer is C. 28, the table shows some indicators of macroeconomic performance in the US economy for 5 decades. Between which decades did the US government achieve an overall improvement in its performance with no trade offs between individual policy goals? Uh, so, so basically, the trade off probably here is between growth and unemployment, or inflation and unemployment. Usually these two things will coincide, but it'll contradict with unemployment. So you want unemployment to, so you're looking here where they had no trade-off. So if you look at the first thing, you did grow, but uh, um, but that growth came at the cost of high inflation, which isn't good, uh, and it also came at the cost of higher unemployment, which isn't good. So you can cross that out. If you look at the other option, so here you didn't grow, which is not good. Your inflation rate was high, increased, which is not good. Your unemployment rate increased, so that's not good either. So you can cross that out. That's like, that was a pretty bad year. Um, so here you didn't grow that much, but your inflation, which is not good, but your inflation rate um, went down, which is good. Your unemployment rate went up though, which is not good. So you can cross that out, I believe, as well. If you look at the last one, hopefully this will be right. So you did grow a bit, which is fine. Your inflation rate went down, which is fine, which is good. Your unemployment rate went down, which is also good. So you can take D. Why might a reduction in domestic interest rates have an adverse effect on a country's balance of payments on the current account? It will cause a rise in the exchange rate. Quite the opposite, in fact. If you reduce domestic interest rate, hot money might flow out, and that decreases the demand for your currency. And also, as your own investors save elsewhere, might even increase the supply of your own currency. So, if anything, this causes exchange rate to go down. So it's obviously not A. It will make the country's industry less competitive. Um, I don't see how it will make the country's industry less competitive. If anything, it will increase the price competitiveness, as if exchange rate goes down, export price might go down. So, that could increase the price competitiveness. So you can cross that out. The resulting higher level of economic activity is likely to increase imports. Now, that could be a reason, and why might. So this might be correct, because this might happen. That if this happens, then definitely this will adversely affect your current account. And outflow of capital, is outflow of capital even recorded in the current account?
Like capital account में होता है.
Yeah, so you can just cross that out right away. So we go on to
ऐसे
our.
में do you think ये could this be hot money outflow?
Even so, um, how does it how does it show that there's an, even if this is like the outflow of hot money, it doesn't explain or show why this has an adverse effect on the current account, right?
हाँ.
At present, a country's government has set its central bank a target of inflation rate of 2%. What is likely to happen to interest rates and exchange rates if the target inflation rate is raised to 3%? So if it's raised to 3%, it means that you have more leeway for inflation. So you can have a more expansionary monetary policy, which means your interest rates would fall, uh, because you can afford a higher inflation rate. Um, and if interest rates fall, as we discussed in the previous question, that leads to hot money flowing out, and all of that type of stuff, reducing your exchange rate as well. Usually, interest rates and exchange rate follow a positive or a direct relationship. So, are we good with? So, can we check these 10 MCQs?
Yes.
Oh God.
Okay, bye.
Okay, so good scene. So we got all of these MCQs correct as well. So pretty good paper for us because that means we got 30 on 30. However, we were three people solving it, so that means 30 divided by 3. That is 10 for Sharia, 10 for me, and 10 for Bilal.
Two for Bilal.
Okay, so 2 for Bilal. So that's 2 for Bilal.
I gave mine to Sherry. I don't give it to you. I'm not.
Oh God, oh God. Chalo, this is it. Anyhow, so hopefully that was helpful.